Welcome to Sovereign Sisters Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Atkins of YourHealthUnbound.com. And before we dive in today, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the deeper meaning behind today, Memorial Day. So this isn't just a long weekend or the unofficial start to the summer. This is a time where we honor the men, women, and also all of the animals, the dogs, the dolphins, the sea lions, the horses, and any other creature who made the ultimate sacrifice while serving in the United States Armed Forces. They laid down their lives so we could have freedom to question, to speak, to build, and to disagree openly. We owe them not just our remembrance, but our commitment to preserving the values they fought for. So to all those who served and to their families who love them and carry their message, we thank you and we honor you on this day. That always gets me. Being a veteran's wife, it's very near and dear to my heart. But let's move on to today's topic. Now, there's a lot of noise in politics right now, but let's cut through the noise because there's one massive piece of legislation that's being called everything from a miracle to a mirage, and that's Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. Honestly, I can't stand the name. It trivializes what should be serious and a sober conversation about national priorities. Calling it beautiful makes it sound flashy, like the goal is optics over substance. And it's over 1,000 pages. And hasn't that become the norm? We've got these massive bloated bills that are nearly impossible to read, let alone to fully understand or properly debate. It really undermines transparency and accountability. And there's trillions of dollars in impact. And somehow we've become numb to what that really means. They aren't abstract dollars. These are taxpayer monies, our money. The government doesn't generate wealth. It redistributes what it takes from us, or worse, prints fiat currency, which quietly chips away at the value of everything we've worked hard to earn. Now, this was passed by the House with a razor-thin margin. And here's what I find troubling. If there's a Republican majority in the House and this bill is supposed to benefit the American people, why is it such a struggle to pass? Well, maybe it's not as unified as it appears, or maybe, just maybe, this bill serves interests that aren't as public-facing as we're told. And at the center of it is the so-called bold mix of tax cuts. But let's be honest, where's the boldness? Really, these aren't sweeping reforms that dramatically change the tax landscape for working families. Deductions and exemptions aren't the same thing as structural change. Trump floated promises: no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on income under $200,000. Well, just about anything that would sound good was in his soundbite. But where's that now? Most of it was either watered down or cut out completely. There was the extension of the 2017 tax, which, let's not forget, heavily favored corporations and the wealthy to begin with. And now they're being made permanent, framed as a win for the middle class. But if you actually run by the numbers, the biggest beneficiaries are still those at the top. New tax exemptions for tips, overtimes, and interest help, but let's not pretend that this is a tax revolution. These are crumbs dressed up as cake. And they conveniently avoid the harder questions, like how we're funding the loss of revenue without piling it onto the national debt. Remember the child tax credit bump? Well, that's only temporary, only through 2028. And after that, it reverts. So it's temporary relief, not structural change. And you have to have a social security number to qualify, which will exclude some of the very people paying into the system. They've also raised the state and local taxes called SALT deduction. The cap went from $10,000 to $40,000, but only for married couples making up to $500,000. Again, ask yourself, who does that really serve? Because that's not exactly middle America. That's the upper tier households in high tax states. They're getting the big break. And then there's this enhanced deduction for seniors, $4,000 more if you're over 65. Sure, that's helpful, but it's limited by income, and it doesn't begin to address the real cost of living challenges retirees are facing with inflation and healthcare. And the Trump accounts, let's call it what it is. It's a legacy move. It's only for 4 years with a $5,000 annual cap, and that's total, not per contributor. So that's $20,000 max, and that's not enough to cover more than maybe a year or two at a state college. But that money's locked up until adulthood, and it's intended for housing or education. But meanwhile, we're cutting student loan subsidies in the same bill. It's a contradiction. It writes itself. And of course, there's a loophole for the well-connected. Contributions from tax-exempt entities like private foundations aren't subject to the $5,000 cap. So once again, the wealthier you are, the more benefit you can unlock. The average Joe doesn't have a family foundation to boost his kid's savings account. The playing field isn't just uneven, it's designed that way. And here's what really gets me. Why are we branding policies with the names of presidents? Trump accounts, Obamacare. What's next? Biden bucks for all the money printing? It's just narcissistic. It turns public policy into personal legacy building. It's instead of focusing on the people it's meant to help. So let's now talk about what the bill takes away. Because while the tax provisions are getting all the attention, it's the cuts and conditions buried deeper in this bill that tells a more troubling story. So Medicaid work requirements start in 2026. The red tape goes up and millions could lose coverage, not because they don't qualify, but because the process is designed to trip them up. This bill introduces work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents starting in 2026, and it increases how often recipients have to prove their eligibility. Well, on the surface, that might sound reasonable. If you can work, you should. But what it ignores is how many people on Medicaid already do work, often in low-wage and unstable jobs that don't offer health care. And then the added red tape, well, that doesn't weed out fraud. It just weeds out people who miss a form, they get laid off, or simply can't keep up with the bureaucracy. So let's start with the fraud that's already been uncovered. The Department of Justice and other agencies have exposed massive abuse, billions lost to fraudulent claims. Fine. That needed to happen. But here's my question. Where did the recovered money go? Why isn't it being reinvested in educating people, supporting job training, or actually helping recipients transition into better situations? Instead, the people who were never part of the problem are now paying the price for it through restricted access and punitive policies. And meanwhile, there's no clear accountability or public audit trail for what happens to the reclaimed funds. That's not reform. That's deflection. We don't fix broken systems by punishing the most vulnerable. We fix them by being honest about where the failures lie and demanding transparency how these failures are addressed. Now let's talk about SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's right there in the name, nutrition. Yet somehow we've allowed it to become a funding stream for soda, candy, ultra-processed junk food. That's not supplemental nutrition. That's subsidized disease. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been vocal about this issue and is right to push for restrictions on how SNAP funds can be used. And I agree with the intent, but it has to go further than that. Taxpayer dollars should support healthy choices, not contribute to the obesity epidemic. But here's the catch. While advocating for healthier options, the administration has simultaneously cut programs that provided access to fresh local produce in schools. So we're telling people what they can't buy, but not ensuring they have access to what they should buy. That's not just hypocritical, that's harmful. And moreover, the focus on restricting purchases assumes that poor dietary choices are solely due to personal responsibility, ignoring the systemic issues like food deserts and lack of nutrition education. If we're serious about improving health outcomes, we need a comprehensive approach. Restrict harmful purchases, yes, but also invest in education, have access to healthy foods, and community support systems. Otherwise, we're just shifting blame without providing solutions. So let's look at the border and defense security. There's this $150 billion in defense, $25 billion for the Golden Dome, another $70 billion for border security, most of it for more wall construction. And this is from the so-called peace president. Well, if Trump wants to be the peace president, then why aren't we leading with diplomacy instead of pouring money into military tech and defense structures exclusively? We're told this is about national security, but the real security begins at home with healthcare, stable jobs, and access to education. We're underfunding the very thing that builds resilience, while we're overfunding the systems that anticipate collapse. So now let's talk about what was cut out entirely, the elimination of taxes on Social Security. It was one of the most popular ideas proposed, and it was scrapped because of the Byrd Rule. Now, you can look up the Byrd Rule, but it basically has to do with how we fund our government. We're told it couldn't be included in the reconciliation because it has a long-term budget impact. Well, that's the technical explanation, but let's look at the bigger picture. Let's get real. Congress found a way to spend $175 billion to Ukraine and nearly $18 billion to Israel in military funds since 2020. That's nearly $200 billion of American taxpayer money spent on foreign wars and overseas defense priorities. Meanwhile, eliminating the federal income tax on Social Security benefits would only cost about $50 billion annually. That means the funding sent overseas in just the past couple of years could have covered several years of tax relief for seniors, Americans who actually earned and paid into the system. We're told there's no money for seniors, but there's always money for war. But none of that was ever seriously debated, because it seems like every time there's a choice between supporting our own people and propping up global conflicts or foreign interests, Congress chooses the latter. If that doesn't tell you something about their priorities, I don't know what does. Tariffs could cover the gap in the long term, but that's not even on the table. Because once again, it's not about the people, it's all about the politics. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against helping others, but when American seniors are struggling to afford groceries, rent, medical care, we shouldn't be taxing their benefits to bankroll global military spending. It should be America first. It shouldn't be a slogan, but it should be our principle. So who wins with this bill? The wealthy, corporations, defense contractors. Look, the tax breaks go deeper at the top. Foundations and connected families get added benefits. Military and border spending gets a blank check. And politicians who get to slap their name on policies like a brand logo care more about headlines than accountability. And who loses? The average American. The senior living on a fixed income, still paying taxes on their Social Security. The working parent who now has to navigate a more complex Medicaid system. It's also the student who just lost access to subsidized loan. The family using SNAP being told what they can't buy while no one is helping them afford what they should be buying. This bill is sold as a win for the middle class. But if you look at the numbers and all the trade-offs, it's clear this is not structural reform. It's selective relief. And more often than not, the people who need the most help are the ones who are being asked to give more, to accept less, and be grateful for the scraps. But it raises the question, is this really about lifting people up or just managing the perceptions? This isn't reform. It's a reshuffling of power, and those in most need of help are being told to be grateful for less. I'll be honest, this is why I hate politics. Because at the end of the day, it's never really about the people. It's always about the money. And the way that the money gets prioritized, how it's spent, who benefits from it, and who gets left behind. And it's rarely aligned with the needs of the everyday American. This bill, like so many others before it, I'm just not saying this is the only one, there have been many, just feels like another round of smoke and mirrors, a bait and switch. Flashy promises, dressed up rhetoric, and just enough surface level wins to keep us quiet, while the real power plays happen behind closed doors. Well, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of watching those in power play musical chairs with our futures. I'm tired of seeing working class leverage to pay for wars we didn't vote for and programs we can't access. I'm tired of being told that we should be grateful while the goalposts keep moving further out of reach. The truth is, we deserve better. But we won't get better until we stop settling for sound bites and start demanding substance. Because the stakes aren't just political, they're personal. So let me offer my 5 top suggestions of what President Trump could do to truly put America first. If President Trump truly wants to lead with the interests of the American people at heart, here are the actions he could take right now, moves that don't require initial congressional approval, just executive courage and a commitment to protecting the health and sovereignty of this nation. First and foremost, I suggest ending all the chemical aerosol spraying in the U.S. skies. President Trump should issue an executive order directing all federal agencies, including the Department of Defense and HHS, to immediately cease any chemical or biological dispersal operations over the U.S. soil, especially those authorized under the PrEP Act or the Title 50 exceptions. He should also call on Congress to formally amend Title 50, subsections 15, 20, and 21, to eliminate the legal loopholes that permit this activity to go on. Let me show you what it says. So if you look on this, it says the Secretary of Defense may not conduct directly or by contract all these things, the spraying of biological agents on the civilian population, with the exceptions of, and I've got it marked in red, any peaceful purpose that is regulated to a medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research activity. But it says informed consent is required. You can only do this if informed consent to the testing was obtained from each human subject. I don't know about you. I wasn't given informed consent, and I didn't give my consent to be sprayed overhead continuously. I was outside today, and there were just so many crisscrosses in the sky. I didn't say that was okay. I didn't, no one ever asked me. I never signed a form. I never gave any verbal or written consent that you can use me as a biological experiment, a human in a biological experiment. So I say this needs to go. So under the current law, the US government still maintains the legal authority to conduct these chemical and biological operations on civilian populations so long as it's authorized under certain exceptions, such as a public health emergency or law enforcement. They're embedded in that Title 50 US Code, and they just remain active today. Now, it's also in the PrEP Act because that's where the emergency health situation is at. That's recently been extended to 2029, and it grants sweeping immunity and operational latitude for chemical countermeasures under public health emergencies. That means Americans still be exposed to unknown substances in the name of national interest with no consent and no accountability. That's how they get around the informed consent rule through the PrEP Act. So, what can Trump do about this? Well, he's president. He can't just unilaterally rewrite Title 50, but he can immediately halt any agency operations taking advantage of those provisions. He can rescind the PrEP Act declaration by directing HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to terminate it, therefore ending the emergency-based authority for these actions. Then he must publicly demand Congress take the next step and formally amend Title 50 to remove these exceptions and restore constitutional limits on government power, protect our air, our water, our bodily autonomy for each and every American. If he wants to prove he's serious about defending American sovereignty, this is the place to start by protecting the very air we breathe. This is how leadership puts people first, by using the existing powers to stop harm and use the platform of the presidency to change the law for good. Now, my second recommendation is to halt all mRNA COVID injections and investigate Operation Warp Speed. He could issue an immediate executive order to suspend mRNA-based COVID-19 injections, revoke emergency use authorization, those EUAs, and open a full investigation into Operation Warp Speed and its outcomes. Now, this matters because these mRNA shots were rushed to the market under Operation Warp Speed during President Trump's first term. At that time, Americans were led to believe that we were desperate for a solution, but we now have clear evidence from peer-reviewed scientific journals, real-world injury reports, and even manufacturers' own trial data that shows alarming levels of harm. They far exceed that of any previous immunization campaign in U.S. history. Then there's the adverse events reports to VAERS. That's the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. They've documented tens of thousands of deaths and serious injuries. Many of these cases remain unacknowledged or dismissed, and yet these products continue to be pushed on the public through policy, marketing, and mandates, despite growing legal and scientific opposition. So President Trump can publicly acknowledge the unintended consequences of Warp Speed, halt the continued rollout of promotion of mRNA shots, and call for an independent, transparent investigations into both the FDA's approval process and the pharmaceutical companies' accountability. Leadership means owning the outcome, even when it started with good intentions. If Trump wants to earn the trust of those harmed, those that are skeptical, or even feel betrayed, this is the moment to say, we got it wrong, and now we fix it. Let's wait and see. My third option here is to demand full transparency and restitution from the Department of Government Efficiency. If you remember, DOJ had gone in to investigate fraudulent funding. And I asked that you immediately release a full public audit of all the funds recovered through these fraud investigations, the waste reduction and efficiency enforcement across federal programs, and issue a direct restitution to taxpayers using those funds. Now, DOJ was created with the promise of streamlining government, rooting out fraud, and saving the American people money. Under the leadership of Elon Musk, it was supposed to use advanced technology and data systems to track waste and inefficiency, particularly in areas like pandemic relief fraud, Medicaid abuse, and federal agency overreach. We heard all those bold claims. We've seen the press releases about billions recovered. But where's the follow through? Where are the checks to the taxpayer? Where's the detailed breakdown of where this money came from and where it's going now? The American people deserve more than vague assurances. We deserve receipts. We deserve restitution. If the government has successfully clawed back funds that were stolen or misused, then that money should be returned, not reabsorbed into a bloated bureaucracy. So as the head of the executive branch, President Trump can order DOJ to publish a comprehensive line item audit trail of all recoveries and redistributions and establish a direct rebate system that puts the money back into the hands of the American taxpayer. This isn't just about numbers on a ledger. This is about rebuilding trust. Taxpayers are shareholders in this nation. And as shareholders, we have every right to see the books and to benefit when waste is finally corrected. Anything less than that is just another government shell game. Transparency is the first step to rebuilding trust. Anything less is theft with just a public relations budget on top of it. My fourth item is to end the Federal Reserve and the IRS and eliminate federal income tax. Now, in the beginning, it could be a phased dismantling of the Federal Reserve System and the Internal Revenue Service and replace the federal income tax with a tariff-based funding model for constitutional, this is the right word, constitutional government functions. Not all the bloat, but what is really under the Constitution is a function of government. The illusion that comes from tax funds is that the government is just that. That the tax funds are paying for the government. That's just an illusion. For decades, it has been known that the federal income tax revenues do not directly fund government operations. Instead, the government freely prints the fiat currency whenever it needs capital, fueling inflation, devaluing our wages, savings, and our retirement accounts. Meanwhile, the IRS enforces punitive tax code that burdens the working Americans and small businesses, while wealthy elites and multinational corporations exploit loopholes and offshore shelters. The Federal Reserve is a private central bank, and it continues to manipulate interest rates. It monetizes debt, and it prints trillions of dollars out of thin air. This isn't fiscal policy. It's legalized theft disguised as a monetary policy. So President Trump can call for the end of the Federal Reserve Act, initiate legislation to abolish the IRS, and replace the income tax system with tariffs, excise taxes, and usage-based revenue systems. So maybe this is where tariffs are starting. We'll have to wait and see. But this is exactly what is in line with the original version of the Constitution. Tariffs on foreign goods, especially from nations exploiting cheap labor and weak environmental standards, can fund the government without taxing Americans' labor. This is how the country was originally designed to operate. This would return economic sovereignty to the people and end the cycle of debt, inflation, and financial servitude. It's not radical, it's overdue. And my fifth suggestion is to ban genetically modified organisms and redirect subsidies to organic farming. So immediately, President Trump could make all genetically modified food products illegal for human and animal consumption, and federal subsidies for GMO and pesticide-heavy conventional agriculture, and redirect those subsidies to support organic and regenerative farming. Then also launch a national nutrition education campaign to rebuild a public awareness of what real food really constitutes. This matters because we were told GMOs would feed the world. They haven't. We were told that it would reduce chemical use. Instead, it increased it. We were told they would be safe, but the data says otherwise. The truth is, GMO foods offer no health benefit. They are nutritionally inferior. They lack biologically active compounds that support vitality and are frequently paired with toxic pesticide residues, especially glyphosate, which has been linked to cancer and endocrine disruption. GMOs aren't food. As a matter of fact, I call them food-like substances because they're really chemical delivery systems. And now they dominate our grocery stores and school lunches, but they often are under the false narrative that they're healthy, nutritious, and even sustainable. But that message doesn't hold up under scrutiny. These products do not nourish. They fill, they preserve the shelf life, and they, of course, drive profits, but they don't support life in any meaning biological sense. Meanwhile, organic food remains out of reach for many families because we're subsidizing the wrong side of the food system. The government rewards pesticide use, GMO seed contracts, and monoculture crops, while independent organic farms struggle to survive. Well, President Trump can sign an executive order to ban the sale and cultivation of genetically modified foods, just as other countries around the world have done. He can shift federal subsidies away from chemical farming and towards organic, biodynamic, and regenerative models, making clean food affordable and accessible. Now, he can also pair that with a nationwide nutrition education program because a healthy nation isn't built on pharmaceutical dependency. It's built on real food, real knowledge, and real sovereignty over our own health. Removing GMOs from the market won't just raise the baseline of our health, it will slash healthcare costs. It will support family farmers, and it will restore integrity in our food supply. So real leadership looks like putting Americans first. So if President Trump wants to prove he's for the people, not for the donors, not for the industries, not for the legacy headlines, here's what he can do right now. Let me summarize it for you. First, end the chemical aerosol spraying that's happening under the PrEP Act and Title 50. Shut it down. We deserve clean skies and full transparency about what we're breathing. Then halt all the mRNA shots developed under Operation Warp Speed. Acknowledge the harm, stop the rollout, and launch a full investigation. Courage means course correcting, not doubling down on the damage. Third, we need to hold DOJ accountable. Where's the money that was recovered from the fraud? Where's the audit trails, the rebates? Taxpayers have a right to know and the right to restitution. Fourth, and the Federal Reserve and the IRS. It's time to stop taxing our labor and printing money out of thin air. Restore honest money and fund government in the constitutional way through tariffs, not financial servitude. And fifth, ban GMOs and pesticides that degrade our soil, our food, and our health. Rebuild a food system that heals instead of harms. Make organic affordable by shifting subsidies and educate the public on how real nutrition works. Because America first doesn't mean war first or profit first or corporations first. It means putting the American people first. And if we're serious about restoring sovereignties over our bodies, our foods, our families, and our future, then leadership must start showing up where it matters, in actions, not in slogans. So I would thank you for joining me here on Sovereign Sisters podcast. Please share this episode with others who may need to hear it. Subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And I encourage you to visit my trusted partners who are listed in the show description to help heal and maintain a healthy lifestyle. These are products that I personally use and I recommend to my clients. And until next time, stay sharp, stay grounded, stay sovereign, and keep asking the questions that matter. God bless.